Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the why, what and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 11th October 2018, and the time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let us start our discussion for the day. This article on page number 9 is related to the non-alignment movement and its current relevance. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 1 under the topic History of the World. Further, it will also form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. Now, previously in the year 2017, a question was asked related to the current relevance of the non-alignment movement. So this also becomes important for us from the essay point of view. Now, you should know that non-alignment movement or NAM was started by newly independent countries which were formed during decolonization after the World War II. And after the end of the World War, the world was divided into two military blocs, in which one was led by the United States of America and the second was led by the erstwhile USSR. And it was in this context of the Cold War, where the world was divided into two military blocs, the NAM was started. And the NAM talked about being or keeping equidistance from both the military blocs which were led by the USA and the USSR respectively. So in short, the non-aligned countries did not want to align with any of the military or the superpower blocs. So now, before understanding this news article, you should try and read the chapter 1 of the class 12th NCERT of political science, which is the contemporary world politics. So this first chapter is related to the Cold War era, and it talks in detail about the Cold War. Further, this chapter talks about the major events that happened during the Cold War. For example, it talks about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was one of the most important events during the Cold War. It also explains about the emergence of two superpower blocs. And finally, this chapter talks about the challenge to the bipolarity or the challenges to the two military blocs of that time. So it is in this context that the non-alignment movement was offered by the newly decolonized countries of Asia, Africa and Latin America, a third option under which they were not supposed to join either of the alliance. That is, one of the alliance which was led by USA and the other alliance which was led by USSR. So these countries decided that they would not align themselves with any of the alliance or the superpower blocs. So to learn about the basics of the Cold War and the basics of non-alignment movement, how it started and what it stood for, you should go through this chapter of the NCERT. So according to authors, there is still space to resurrect or restart the non-alignment movement as a soft balancing mechanism against the current powerful states. For example, the United States, Russia and the China. So simply it says that there is still scope for, so in short the article says that there is scope for starting of a new non-alignment movement or the rebirth of the non-alignment movement, which will try and keep the powerful states or countries like United States, Russia and China under control through the use of soft balancing mechanism. So now let us understand what does the author mean by the soft balancing mechanism. So according to the authors, the soft balancing is used to describe non-military forms of balancing against the dominance of stronger states. And this non-military form of balancing should be done through economic, diplomatic and institutional means. Further, the authors say that it occurs when military advantage of stronger states is so overwhelming that other countries cannot balance the country through military means. And that is why they have to deploy different measures like the economic, diplomatic and institutional measures to balance the power of the stronger states. Now simply let us understand, some countries have a military advantage. For example, the United States and Russia and China have a military advantage over most of the countries of the world. And it is in this scenario that the countries which do not have such military might try to balance the force or the power of such military powers by the use of various measures like economic, diplomatic and institutional measures. For example, in the South China Sea, China is trying to assert its military power and the economic power. And it is in this context that the ASEAN countries are trying to use the United Nations platform to counter the power of China by calling for equal and proper implementation of the United Nations Law of Sea. So the use of United Nations platform by the ASEAN countries against China is an example of soft balancing of power. Now, how was the soft balancing used by the non-alignment movement or the NAM countries? So regarding this, the authors say that the leading countries of the non-alignment movement, for example, India, Indonesia and Yugoslavia, they had little material ability to constrain the superpower conflict between the USA and Soviet Union. So during the Cold War, the power of the United States of America and the USSR was so high that the non-alignment movement countries like India, Indonesia and Yugoslavia had little material ability to counter the power of USA and USSR. So to avoid balancing of power by the use of military, these non-alignment movement countries indulged in soft balancing mechanism. And they did so by attempting to delegitimize the threatening behavior of superpowers, and particularly these countries adopted the means of activism at the United Nations and the regional formats. So now let us look at some of the tools which were used by the non-aligned countries to counter the power of USA and USSR. As mentioned earlier, to understand this article better, you should go through the chapter 1 of the class 12th NCERT, that is the contemporary world politics. Now let us look at some of the tools used by non-alignment movement for soft balancing. The first included the naming and shaming campaign, wherein these powers used it to showcase the colonial behavior of the major powers in Africa, Asia and Latin America. For example, during the Vietnam War, the NAM countries criticized the role of USA and France. So this was one of the tools, that is naming and shaming campaign against the misuse of power by the superpowers of that time. Secondly, the NAM countries talked about creation of several nuclear weapons free zones. So the non-alignment countries were against the use and misuse of nuclear power. Thirdly, the NAM countries supported the peaceful measures such as the Outer Space Treaty and the Antarctica Treaty, etc. And regarding the Outer Space Treaty, you should know that it talked about the peaceful use of space, which means that the space or the outer space should not be used for military purposes. Further, the Antarctica was to be treated as global common and should not be colonized by the superpowers of that time. So this means that world had equal rights over the Antarctic continent, which was not colonized till now. And finally, the authors have highlighted the current relevance of non-alignment movement. So in this regard, the authors say that the non-alignment movement countries need to ensure that some of the major conflicts of our times, for example, the Ukraine crisis, the South China Sea conflict, do not turn into military conflicts. And for these, the authors say that the non-alignment countries need to ensure that the superpowers or the countries like China, the US and Russia are balanced and restrained through the use of soft balancing mechanism. Further, regarding the role of India in the non-alignment movement, the authors say that India is now a leading power in the world. And India may not be able to lead the non-alignment movement in ensuring soft balancing against the current major powers. This is because India currently is involved in border conflicts with China. It has good relations with superpowers like Russia, and it has evolving partnership with the United States. And apart from these alignments, India has now the growing capability to militarily balance other powers. So the authors say that India is no more neutral or non-aligned, and it has started aligning itself with major powers like Russia, and it has also started partnership with the United States, which is another major power of our times. Further, India has now the growing capability to militarily balance other powers. However, as we know that non-alignment movement did not stand for the use of military power. So it is in this line that the authors say that India may now not lead the non-alignment movement because of following reasons. And regarding the utility or the current use of NAM's ability, the authors say that the non-alignment movement's ability for soft balancing is currently being showcased by ASEAN. And in this regard, the authors say that the ASEAN countries are collectively soft balancing China by indulging with India, Japan, US in the South China Sea conflict. So simply the ASEAN countries are not in favor of using the military power against China. However, it has started aligning with the India, Japan and United States to soft balance the China. And in this line, it has asserted that China should follow the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So these are some of the points highlighted by the authors regarding the current relevance of non-alignment movement. Now, as we know that non-alignment movement becomes an important part of the syllabus, so all the points mentioned by the authors are also important. So you should try and go through the NCERT and then try and understand this article in detail. With this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 3 is related to the cases of Zika virus in the state of Rajasthan. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Science. And you should know that frequently questions are asked in the preliminary examination based on various outbreaks of diseases. For example, in the year 2017, a question was asked related to the Zika virus disease. Further, in the year 2015, a question was asked related to the outbreak of Ebola virus. And the question required us to identify the countries in which the outbreak of this virus has taken place. So these two questions tell us that this is an important topic for us from prelims point of view. So for this, what we will do is we will try to understand the key facts that have been highlighted by the World Health Organization or the WHO. So under this article, we will try to understand certain key facts that are related to Zika virus, which have been mentioned on the WHO's website. Further, we will try to understand the ways in which the Zika virus can be transmitted from one person to another. And finally, we will also look at the treatments that are available which are related to Zika virus. So let us try and understand some key facts first. Now this article is in news because 32 people have been found to be infected with the Zika virus in Jaipur in Rajasthan. Now regarding the Zika virus, these 4 points should be kept in mind. That is the vector which transmits the Zika virus. Secondly, the symptoms which are related to Zika virus. Which age group is affected by this Zika virus. And finally, you should know about the risks that are associated with the Zika virus. So first of all, you should know that Zika virus is caused by a virus. So it is a virus-borne disease. And further, this virus is transmitted by a vector called the Aedes mosquito. Further, the symptoms are generally mild and include fever, rash, conjunctivitis, muscle and joint pain, headache, etc. And further, these symptoms typically last for only 2 to 7 days. However, one unique fact is that most people with Zika virus infection do not develop any symptom. So it is difficult to identify if a person is suffering from the infection of Zika virus or not. Now, Zika virus becomes dangerous during the times of pregnancy. And if a person is infected by Zika virus during pregnancy, it can cause infants to be born with a symptom called microcephaly. And this microcephaly results in underdeveloped brain and small size of the head. And it is also related to other congenital malformations known as the congenital Zika syndrome. So the proper development of a child is hindered because of the presence of Zika virus infection, and that is why it is known as congenital malformations, because this underdevelopment is present from the time of birth itself. Further, the Zika virus complicates the pregnancy. For example, it leads to premature births, and it can also lead to miscarriage in pregnant women. And it is also associated with increased risk of neurological complications. So the key facts that emerge from this discussion are that it is caused by a virus which is transmitted by the Aedes mosquito. Symptoms are given here, which include fever, rash, headache, etc. Further, most people who are infected with Zika virus do not develop symptoms. However, it can become dangerous during the times of pregnancy. And this leads to microcephaly, which is represented by underdeveloped brain and small size of head of the newborns. And all these underdevelopments are present in a child from the times of birth. That is why these are known as congenital malformations, and which is also known as congenital Zika syndrome. Further, it can lead to premature delivery, and it can also lead to miscarriage in pregnant women. Further, if a person is infected with Zika virus, there is increased risk of neurological complications. So all these facts are important for us from prelims point of view. Now regarding the transmission of Zika virus, you should know that it is transmitted by a bite of the infected mosquito named the Aedes aegypti. And these mosquitoes are mainly prevalent in tropical and subtropical regions. So the spread of Zika virus is mainly in the tropical and subtropical regions because of the presence of the vector or the carrier mosquito. Further, the Aedes mosquito usually bite during the daytime, and the presence of these mosquitoes is peak during the early morning and late afternoon or evening. Now another important point that emerges is that this is the same mosquito which transmits other vector-borne diseases. For example, dengue, chikungunya and yellow fever. So this is another important fact that should be kept in mind. Further, you should know that Zika virus is also transmitted from mother to fetus during pregnancy, as we have learned in the previous slide. Further, it can also be transmitted through sexual contact, through transfusion of blood and blood products, and through the organ transplantation. So these are the 4 to 5 ways in which the Zika virus can be transmitted from one person to another. And one important fact is that there is no treatment available for Zika virus infection and its associated diseases. That is why it has become a dangerous disease and it has become difficult to control the Zika virus. Now, if you go through the question that was asked in 2017, the first fact reads that in tropical regions, Zika virus disease is transmitted by the same mosquito that transmits dengue. So this is a correct statement that we have learned about recently. Secondly, sexual transmission of Zika virus disease is possible. So this second statement is also correct. Hence the correct answer in this case is C, both 1 and 2. Further, in the year 2015, a question was asked related to the outbreak of Ebola virus. And the question required us to identify the countries in which this outbreak is going on. So the correct answer in this case was the Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. So these were the places in Africa which were in news because of the outbreak of Ebola virus. So this is another way in which the questions can be asked related to outbreak of various diseases. Further, in the year 2015, another question was asked related to the outbreak of H1N1 virus. So the question asked, H1N1 virus is sometimes mentioned in the news with reference to which one of the following diseases? So it was a very simple and straightforward question that was asked related to the H1N1 virus. And the correct answer in this case was D, that is, it is related to swine flu. So these are the three types of questions can be asked on major disease outbreaks. Further, you should know that information related to various disease outbreaks is always present on the World Health Organization's website. So this is an authentic source to study about the various disease outbreaks for our examination. With this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 9 is related to the India-Japan relations. And this is in the context of the upcoming visit of Prime Minister to Japan. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. And you should know that previously in the year 2013 in the General Studies paper 2, a question was asked related to the India-Japan relations. So this becomes important for us from mains point of view. Now, although this is a news in transition because major points will emerge only after the visit of Prime Minister, let us try to understand the key points that have been highlighted by the author in this article. So first, let us understand the focus of this article. So in this, the author highlights that the PM Narendra Modi has made India-Japan relations a key priority area in his foreign policy as a part of India's Act East policy. So in short, the author has highlighted that Japan is a key country in India's Act East policy. Further, the author has highlighted that Japan views India as a pivotal state in the Indian Ocean, and it is under its policy of free and open Indo-Pacific vision. Further, the author says that Japan is focusing relations with India on two critical areas. The first is the maritime security, and the second is related to the strategic connectivity. So let us try and understand these two aspects, that is the maritime security and the strategic connectivity in detail. Regarding the maritime security, the author has highlighted that Japan is keen to strengthen the trilateral Malabar exercises with India and United States. So the Malabar exercise, which is a trilateral military exercise between India, US and Japan. So Japan wants to strengthen it further. Further, Japan has shown interest for military exchanges with India, and it further wants to include Army and Air Force exchanges. Further, Japan is also keen on an acquisition and cross-servicing agreement. And this acquisition and cross-servicing agreement will be based on the lines of Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement with the United States, which is briefly known as the LIMOA. So India and Japan are also negotiating an agreement with the name Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, which is based on the lines of LIMOA, which India and US have recently signed. And regarding LIMOA, you should know that LIMOA provides militaries of both nations access to each other's military facilities. However, you should know that the access provided by these militaries is not automatic or obligatory, and it is primarily for the purpose of refueling and replenishment of their military vessels. Further, Japan also wants to engage with India to improve its awareness in the Indian Ocean region, and for this, India is keen to set up an information fusion center. However, this information fusion center has not been established till now, and only when this information center is established, we will be able to understand the key objectives of Information Fusion Center. So besides these points of cooperation, the author has highlighted one concern, and it is related to the Japan's unwillingness to let India produce the US-2I amphibious aircraft. So the author says that a deal related to the production of US-2I amphibious aircraft will be negotiated in the upcoming visit of Prime Minister. And regarding the amphibious aircrafts, you should know that these are the aircrafts which can move in the aerial space as well as the ocean surface. And these become important in the rescue operations. For example, the need of amphibious aircraft was recently highlighted when one of the Indian soldiers was stuck in the ocean. So the negotiation with Japan becomes important for the finalization and the production of amphibious aircrafts. Further, regarding the strategic connectivity, the author has highlighted that India and Japan have been working together on infrastructure projects in the northeast of India. And one of the projects on which India and Japan are working is the Northeast Road Connectivity Improvement Project, and which is between the Meghalaya and Mizoram. So this is one of the important strategic connectivity projects that has been undertaken by Japan in northeastern part of India. Further, the author says that both the countries are also building the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. And regarding the objectives or the pillars of Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, the author says that these are developmental projects, quality infrastructure projects, capacity building, and people-to-people partnership. And the author highlights that both these countries are working on this corridor to counter the China's Belt Road Initiative, that is BRI, or which was earlier known as the One Belt One Road project of China. So India and Japan are working on Asia-Africa Growth Corridor with a view to counter China's Belt Road Initiative or the One Belt One Road Initiative. So the two key areas for partnership between India and Japan are related to the maritime security and the strategic connectivity as highlighted by the author. So this is a news in transition, and let us see how the story unfolds once the Prime Minister visits Japan. With this, let us move on to the next article. Now this article on page number 8 is related to the arrest of an editor of the magazine in Tamil Nadu, and he has been arrested under the section 124 of the Indian Penal Code. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2. And the arrest of the editor has raised questions related to the freedom of speech and expression. And you should know that in the year 2014, a question was asked related to this provision of the Indian Constitution. And we know that freedom of speech and expression falls under the Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. So under this article, let us try to understand what is the controversy, what are the key provisions of section 124 of IPC, and how the imposition of section 124 in this case is hindering or restraining the freedom of expression and speech. Now first let us understand what is the news related to. Now the news is related to the arrest of R.R. Gopal, who is the editor of the Tamil magazine Nakhiran, and he has been arrested under the section 124 of the Indian Penal Code. So in this regard, the editorial says that the use of section 124 of the IPC for the arrest of the editor of Tamil magazine is a blatant abuse of power by the state government. And the editor of this Tamil magazine was arrested based on a complaint which was filed by the Tamil Nadu Governor's office. And in this FIR, the Governor's office had cited some articles published in this magazine. Now regarding the section 124 of the IPC, you should know that it applies to assaulting high constitutional functionaries such as the President and the Governor with an intent to compel or restrain the use of any lawful power. So any activity of a person which tries to compel or restrain or limit the use of power of the President and the Governor or any high constitutional functionary can be booked under the section 124 of the IPC. And in general, the section 124 of IPC deals with the offences against the state. And you should know that section 124A is related to the sedition charges. So now let us understand the grounds on which a person can be arrested under the section 124 of IPC. So the section 124 of IPC deals with the assault against President or Governor, etc. with an intention or intent to compel or restrain the exercise of any lawful power. In short, it means that it deals with the assault against President and Governor, and this assault is done with an intention that the President and Governor cannot exercise their powers freely. So in detail, this section reads that whoever or any person who assaults or wrongfully restrains, attempts wrongfully to restrain or overawes by the mean of criminal force or the show of criminal force, or attempts to overawe President or Governor shall be punished with imprisonment for either description of a term which may extend to 7 years and shall be liable to a fine. So there are provisions of fine and provisions for imprisonment up to 7 years. So simply these are the 4 grounds on which the section 124 can be used to arrest a person. And you should know that overawe someone means to write or publish about someone in such a manner that he is inhibited in exercising his power. So after understanding the provisions of the section 124 of IPC, let us try to understand what was the controversy and what are the important points that have been highlighted by this editorial in this regard. Now let us understand about the controversy. So recently an assistant professor named Nimla Devi was arrested in Tamil Nadu, and she was arrested for trying to lure students into sex work. So now Mr. R.R. Gopal, who is the editor of a magazine in Tamil Nadu, tried to link the governor's name to this controversy of the assistant professor Nimla Devi. And it is due to the publication of this article in the magazine, the governor's office directed the police to arrest R.R. Gopal under the section 124 of IPC. So in this regard, the editorial highlights that whether the article is in bad taste or derogatory or offensive, it does not in any way attract the section 124 of IPC. So in this regard, the article says that the word overall, which has been used in the section 124 of IPC to arrest the editor of the magazine, suggests that the editor committed an offence which posed real danger to the exercise of authority of governor in Tamil Nadu. However, in this light, the article says that to extend the meaning of overall to a work of journalism does not hold good in law, and it reflects the instances of abuse of power bestowed on the constitutional office. So simply the article says that invoking section 124 of IPC to arrest the editor of a magazine restrains or limits the freedom of speech and expression of the journalists. And it also reflects the abuse of power which has been bestowed in the constitutional office. So under this article, we have learned about the controversy which led to the arrest of the editor of the magazine and on the grounds on which he was arrested. Further, we have learned about the criticism that has been highlighted in this editorial regarding the arrest of the editor. So in this regard, the editorial highlights that the use of section 124 of IPC is against the freedom of speech and expression which has been provided to the journalists. And also it amounts to the abuse of power which has been bestowed in the constitutional office of Governor of Tamil Nadu. With this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 7 is related to a notification of Government of India related to the cleaning of river Ganga. So this forms a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Issues on Environment. Now previously you should know that in the year 2016 a question was asked related to the National Ganga River Basin Authority. So let us try to understand the important points that come out from the notification of Government of India, and at the end of this discussion we will try to answer this question. Now this article is in news because the Union Government by a notification has mandated that minimum environmental flow should be maintained at various locations on the river Ganga. And you should know that rivers generally get polluted when the flow in the river is obstructed. For example, when the Yamuna river enters the city of Delhi, the water flow is minimized because of the various canals that are taken out before Delhi. So due to the stagnation of water, the pollution in the rivers increases highly. And to avoid this situation, a minimum environmental flow or the minimum flow of river is required to keep the river clean. And now in case of Ganga, the Union Government has made it compulsory to maintain a minimum environmental flow in the river of Ganga. Now this notification ensures that a minimum environmental flow is maintained even after the water from the river is diverted for various projects. For example, even after the water is diverted for the purposes like irrigation, hydropower, domestic or industrial use, a minimum flow has to be maintained in order to keep the river clean. So simply this means that the diversion for any of the purpose cannot be excused to maintain the minimum environmental flow in the river. So this will be a major step in keeping the river water clean at various points. Further, regarding the existing projects, the notification says that these projects will have to comply with this minimum environmental flow within a period of 3 years. And this notification has allowed an exception for the mini and micro projects which do not alter the flow characteristics of the river or the stream significantly. So these kind of projects will be exempted from maintaining the minimum river flow or minimum environmental flow for the river. Now after understanding the key details highlighted in this notification, let us try to understand some of the facts that are related to the National Mission for Clean Ganga or NMCG. So regarding the National Mission for Clean Ganga or NMCG, you should know that it was registered as a society in 2011 under the Societies Registration Act 1860. This means that NMCG is a statutory body. Further, you should know that previously it acted as the implementation arm of the National Ganga River Basin Authority. And this NGRBA was constituted under the provisions of Environmental Protection Act 1986. And you should know that the NGRBA has now been replaced by National Council for Rejuvenation, Protection and Management of River Ganga. And this is shortly known as National Ganga Council. And you should know that the National Ganga Council has also been created under the provisions of Environmental Protection Act 1986. And you should also know that the Environmental Protection Act provides for a 5-tier structure at the national, state and district level to prevent pollution in Ganga River. So this is another important fact for us from prelims point of view. And under this, at the first level is the National Ganga Council, which is under the chairmanship of Prime Minister of India. And earlier you should know that NRGBA was headed by Prime Minister. However, now this NRGBA has been dissolved and it has been replaced by the National Ganga Council. At the second level is the Empowered Task Force under the chairmanship of Union Minister of Water Resources. Then there is National Mission for Clean Ganga. And finally, there are state Ganga committees and district Ganga committees. So these are the 5-tier structure that has been provided at national, state and district level to prevent pollution in river Ganga. So some of the facts that we have discussed under the National Mission for Clean Ganga are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. And regarding the question that was asked in 2016, the question reads, which of the following are the key features of National Ganga River Basin Authority? So now we know that this National Ganga River Basin Authority has been replaced with the National Ganga Council. So the first statement reads, the river basin is the unit of planning and management. So this statement is correct. The second is that it spearheads the river conservation efforts at national level. So this statement was also correct. However, the third statement reads, one of the chief ministers of the states through which the Ganga flows becomes the chairman of NGRBA on a rotation basis. This statement is incorrect because NGRBA was headed by the Prime Minister of India and presently the National Ganga Council is headed by PM. So if you see the options, you can see that B, C and D can be easily eliminated because the statement 3 is incorrect. Hence the correct answer in this case is A, 1 and 2 only. With this, let us move on to the next article. Now this article on page number 9 is related to the virus that is causing the deaths of lions in Gir forest. So this article discusses about the canine distemper virus. And about the various reasons for the deaths, we have discussed it in the Daily News Simplified of 4th October 2018. So you should try and go through this video to understand the issue in detail. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let us move on to the question for the day.